back to my studio. This is me waving at you from Cumbria. It's a very wild, blustery day out there, as it says in Winnie the Pooh, on just such a blusterous day as this. And that's when their house falls, when the tree falls down and Wall is made homeless, I think, is what happens. Anyway, it is quite wild out there, so I hope that the sound quality isn't affected by it. It's lovely. I love it when it's really wild and epic out there. The leaves on the trees are just looking beautiful, and they're slowly getting blown away. And I think probably if I go for a walk later on this afternoon, there won't be many left on the trees at this rate at all. So I have this lovely view. I'm actually looking at the view that I showed you when I went out the other day to look at the fungi in my sketchbook video. I actually kind of get to look at that and the fells and the trees and the fields, and it's just lovely. And I just watch the seasons. I sit here and I sit and sew and I look out and I just watch the seasons changing, and it's the most beautiful thing. I love being in connection with nature. When we did our house up, which was it was kind of a barn when we bought it, it was very much not a house. It was very much, you know, ground zero, if you like. It was rubble built, very old building, and we had to wrestle with it for a couple of years while we got it into shape. And we lived down here in a caravan, and it was the most idyllic experience. We moved in, I think, in the August, so it was summer, and there was nothing to do except sit in your caravan or sit outside your caravan. My husband built us a sort of a bathroom type arrangement down here in an outbuilding, because gradually the house was kind of knocked to bits and there was nothing in it anyway. So that's how we lived. We lived out here, and it was blissful, because I think being out in nature, you just can't beat it. And there was no housework. Living in a caravan, no housework, you know, nothing to do. It was such a tiny space. So it's a bit like that now, really, but I live in my studio. I've got this very comfortable studio. It's nice and warm in here, and as I say, I just look out the window and see what's going on. And the chickens go past and the geese go past, and I've just seen a donkey head sticking around the side of where their stable arrangement out there. So I was showing you last week some brown fabrics. We had a lovely big box of brown fabrics, did we not? And if you weren't here last week, well, you better go back over and see what we were up to last week. And welcome here if it's your first time. It's lovely to have you here in my happy studio. I was looking into my sketchbook for some inspiration, and I realised I kind of showed you the fungi that I'd drawn and stitched. Oops, let's see if I can do this for you. I was showing you that kind of arrangement, but actually I think the thing which weirdly enough gave me the greatest inspiration, kind of, is this very blank page. And it looks totally blank, but it's actually got, I don't know if you can see, it's actually got layers of printing on. I did various different versions of it. I kept printing and printing till I got to this very dark brown, and you can actually see it's got some other colours underneath. And for some weird reason, that's kind of, I don't know, in the back of my head somewhere, which is why I'm working on this lovely brown fabric under my embellishing machine. So I'm going to finish this off. Oh, excuse me, I've got a bit of frog in my throat. I'll finish off the embellishing and I'll show you what I've got so far, and then we'll see what's going to happen next. So you can see when this is kind of ruckling up here, you have to just be a little bit careful and make sure you do it from one side to the other, or sort of round, so that you're kind of taking this in as you go, okay? So don't leap from here to here, because you'll end up with a big bunch in the middle, okay? So this is where I've got my two pieces of fabric, and I've just joined them together. It's got a very waggly seam. I just put one piece over on top of the other and did a quick seam down it. Don't look closely at it, please. It's not a great seam, but it means I've got both my pieces of fabric now joined together. And I'm going to put a little piece of this on top, like that. And we'll get that embellished down next. Okay, so this is what I've got so far. If I just unravel it, I had this rolled up to get it under the embellisher, and basically you can see it is now a long thin strip. There we go, and it's in these lovely rich browns. If I show you the other side, you can see And different amounts of embellishing happen depending on not so much how much I use the machine, but it's more on what the fabric does. Each fabric pushes a different amount through, so you get this variety. And the back is lovely. I mean, you could be using this as a technique. You can push fabrics through from the other side if you want to. You could be putting things on the back and pushing them through with your embellish. You could do all sorts of fun things. But we won't go into that today because that's a bit not for today. So I've left the edges quite big, as you can see, because I think I'm probably going to turn them in like that. But even if I'm not, it means I've got the choice of cutting them down a bit and maybe embellishing them so that they're kind of a bit rougher. But what I do like is the shading we've got going on. It's very subtle, but it is there, and I'm appreciating that. And I'm just loving this brown. I don't know what it is. It's something about the earth at the moment that's just saying, be earthy, it's autumn, it's time to be, you know, connecting to the earth. I think we all need to do that, don't we? We all need to be out there in nature. It's our greatest saviour and sanity maker, I think, is nature. So basically what I've done now is I've created myself 2 little samples here to see what I'm going to do with this next. What I want to do is stitch onto this surface to hold it in place and to add some more sort of shading to it. So what I've done is I've taken this basic mix of the brown fabric and the calico, and I put a piece of stabilizer underneath. If you haven't come across this sort of thing before, this is a tearaway stabilizer. It's the sort of thing you get, you know, when you buy a sweatshirt or something that's got lettering on. You often find this stuff underneath the lettering inside, and it does tear. It tears better one way than the other. It does tear. Hang on, there we go. It does tear like that. And what you do is you put it underneath here, and that will hold it all together when you're stitching, and it stops your machine eating the fabric. If you just use that, that's really quite soft and your machine would sort of gobble it up. Now you might want that effect, you might want it all scrunched up, but you can make use of that if you want to. But if you want it to keep it flatter and more stable, then use a stabilizer. Okay, lots of different kinds available. You can get iron-on ones. I like this because it's quite flexible and I don't have to iron it on. It's very versatile. So I'll put that out of the way. So that's what I've got here. And what I did was I did 2 different kinds of stitching, which you might be able to see. That's a straight up and down stitching, and that is sort of roundy stitching. And if I show you on the back, you'll be able to see more easily. There you go, just very random, just free machine embroidery. Anybody can do it. It's not rocket science. This has gone up and down in different, I haven't gone up from one place, I've gone up and down in different bits so that you get this sort of variety. It's not all in one line. Be aware that when you do a lot of free machine embroidery, again, it can, you know, change the surface a little bit, and it depends what sort of effect you want on it. So that's kind of made it a bit more, I don't know what the word is even, just sort of roundy. Whereas that has, you can see it's different. You can see it's different. It's giving you that sort of linear feeling to it. So now I have to decide what I'm going to do on here. I wonder, what would you do? Would you do the straight up and down one? Or would we use this one? I wonder. It's a tricky one because you'll get a different effect depending on what you do. But what I'm liking here is the way, because I'm stitching into it in a rounded way, you know, it's like vermicelli or something, isn't it? When you do quilting and you do these sort of vermicelli-like movements, I think I prefer that one. That's kind of flattened it, which I'm not so keen on. So I think we're going to go with this version, because I feel as though it enhances the texture rather than taking away the texture. And I think this is a textured piece. It's about the earth, and the earth is just full of texture. So this is what I'm going to do next, is stitching onto here, which will take me a little while, but it'll be so enjoyable. It's one of these mindless jobs when you're stitching like this onto a surface, onto a background like this. It's the most mindless, relaxing thing to do, I think, because all you're doing is stitching, and you're just controlling the fabric and the thread, and the machine just does its own thing. So it's a bit like embellishing. So let's get threaded up and get on with that bit next. Oh, before I start stitching, the other thing I really need to make a decision on is, am I having rough ends or am I having ends that are tucked in? and I think I'm going to go for ends that are tucked in like that. So I'll have to cut myself a piece of stitch and tear roughly to that size, and then what I'll do is I'll fold those ends over so it goes over the back of the stitch and tear, and then when I'm stitching, all of that will just get pulled into a nice, it won't be a totally neat edge, but it will be a neater edge than if I just leave the edges raw, and I feel as though that's what I want for this, a more defined edge, I should say. Oh, there's something very, very soothing about pinning things, I think. It's a very relaxing activity. Obviously, providing you don't stab yourself with a pin, obviously. It has been known. I'm not paying attention, but I just think, isn't that lovely? I'm warm and snug inside here, and it's crazy autumn out there today. It's like it's blowing up for another equinox or something. Big changes coming in the air. But I'm just sitting here sticking pins into here, and it is so relaxing, and it's very satisfying also because I'm creating an edge here. I'm creating a nice slightly wobbly edge, as I said. It's not meant to be perfect, it's going to be coggly, and as I stitch it, obviously the stitching will alter it as well, and it'll push bits out and pull bits in. The stitching, it's like you have a degree of control over it, but not completely. And you haven't got a complete control over the effect it's going to have on your fabric, which is what I love. There's an alchemy happens. So I'm putting quite a lot of pins in because I want to keep this edge nice and tight for stitching into. Isn't that just so satisfying? I just love that. And I love this texture we've got going on down here, and I think the stitching I'm going to do is just going to enhance that. So let's carry on pinning, and then we'll get to some sewing. Right, okay, so let's see where we're at with this. If you haven't seen this before, my bottom moving, I'm on a wave stool, which is like, it's got rockers on the base of it, which means that every time I kind of want to move, I'm not stuck on a static seat, which I find really, really good for my back. I love this stool. So you can see I've got my fabric all along here like this. It's like a long tail, and I'm just going to get sewing. I've got it pinned, but I haven't pinned all of it because I decided that if I pin all of it, it's going to be held very rigid, and I want it to be able to move. So we'll see how it goes, and I'll maybe pin it as I go along, but I'm going to start in the middle with the stitching and see where we get to. And if it starts to get a bit big at this end, I just roll it up. So this is free machine embroidery. If you haven't done this before, it's the easiest thing in the world to do. You need, on your sewing machine, you need an embroidery foot, you need to lower your feet, dog teeth, underneath, and there's usually a little switch or something underneath, or cover them, and you know, just get going. Make sure your fabric is sort of stabilized with something stiff like this underneath it, or you can put it all into an embroidery hoop to get you going. If anybody's interested, I do have a video in my playlist called a beginner's free machine embroidery little course. Very small, very simple, but gets you going. And I have to say, I love doing free machine embroidery like this, where I'm just kind of covering the whole surface with stitches, and it changes the surface. It adds light, and it adds texture and colour, and it changes it from what it was originally. And I love that, and I'm not really controlling it. I'm just letting the machine do its thing, and I just move the fabric around. If I show you underneath what I'm doing, that's, you know, it couldn't be simpler than that. And I might put a second colour on top, I'm not sure. But it's just so easy to do. It's not rocket science, and I find it very meditative actually. If I've got a big piece of this to do, I'm so happy, because it's something you can come back to. It's mindless and mindful at the same time, because it doesn't require any sort of decision making. You just let the machine run and you move the fabric. So with the edges, I just kind of come in as close as I can in between the pins, and then I'll gradually take the pins out and work my way along. So if they're in the way at all, move them, but you just might have to hold your fabric as well. So I think the best thing is, because obviously you'll all fall asleep if I show you me stitching all of this, I will show you it when it's done. Okay, alright, so if you're still awake, this is what I have achieved with all my stitching, and it just has the loveliest feel to it. I know it's completely bonkers, and you're probably thinking, what on earth is she going to do with this? Where is this going to go? You know, what else is possible here? I'll just show you the back here. Look at this. There's lots of little strandy bits to cut off, but look in the back, you can see how much stitching I've done, and you know, I might do a little bit more, I don't know. There's a little, if you look at the back, you can always see where it might need a little bit extra putting in. But most of it's pretty okay. I'm quite happy with that. You can see where some of my tension wasn't quite so hot, but that's okay as well. The beautiful thing is nobody really looks at the back of your work, so that's fine. What we're going to look at is the front, and I'm just loving the feeling of this. I know it sounds quite mad, but it's got this lovely substance to it now. It's, you know, it was a collection of fabrics that I've just pulled together, and it's now got this lovely sort of substance to it. It's become something. I think the word they use in the world of art and art making would be a constructed textile, really, because I've constructed something which may or may not have a purpose, really, and I just love it. So I mean, this could be, you know, rolled up into something, you know, it could be coiled. I guess you could fold it and turn it into some kind of book type thing like this. But I genuinely don't know where it's going to go. So if you've got any suggestions, what would you do next? What would you do next? I've got a random piece of brown thing here. Don't quite know what it's for, don't know quite where it's going, but I'm absolutely trusting that this is going to take me somewhere. It's going to take us into a piece of art, and we just can't see the rest of it at the moment. So I think that's probably it for today, because as I say, I don't know where it's going. Please do leave me a comment if you've got anything to say about how we've made this, or the stitching involved, or the embellishing, or as I say, you know, where do you think we could go with this next? There's plenty of scope for imagination here. Now that it's at this stage, it's definitely not just your average kind of thing that's going to hang on the wall. It's going to be something different, and I don't know what that's going to be yet. So leave me a comment. Thanks so much for joining me here on this crazy journey where we never know quite where we're going. I really appreciate your faith in me, that we do end up somewhere, and it's often quite surprising, and I think it can only be good, really. I will see you next week in my studio, and we will see what's going to happen next. Ba ba da ba da ba da ba ba.